What's up, everybody? Welcome into this Wednesday edition of Pushing the Pile. Mike Renner here alongside Kyle Long. Today we're going through receiving core tiers. That's wide receivers, that's tight ends. We've done quarterbacks. Kyle did O-line. We did running backs on the Monday show. Now we're getting to receiving cores. But first, Kyle, 4th of July this weekend. You got any big plans?
Well, first and foremost, I want to say what a holiday. We have so many holidays.
Where does it stand in your holiday?
It is
pantheon?
the number one holiday that was ever invented. And you know what it stands, what we're celebrating is the birth of a nation and the birth of an idea and a few very, very bright people that set our country up for success in the long run. And it's funny because it's hundreds of years old at this point, and you look back at the documents and you're like, well, a lot of this stuff still pertains, and it's they were ahead of their time. It was like Chip Kelly and the spread offense, Rich Rodriguez. They're just doing shit back then that, quite frankly, a lot of people probably weren't thinking of. But right now we get to celebrate and do it every year. And for years and years and years, we would go to Montana. It was the only time that our whole family could get together with before football season. You get that break between spring ball and training camp. We would be in Montana. This year, I'm going to be home. With two little kids, travel's tough. So we're going to be celebrating in South Florida. You got any good plans for the 4th?
No, unfortunately, my wife actually has to work. We're actually going to be celebrating after the show today a little bit because she's off. But it is my favorite holiday as well. It's like the one holiday that's an actual party. Like every other holiday has like events and things of like that you need to do. July 4th, all you really need to do is just have a good time from the time you wake up.
Appreciate where you're at
until the time you go to bed. And that's exactly it. Appreciate the fact that, well, you live in America and that it's the greatest country in the world. All right, let's get to some news before we get to these tiers. Darren Waller unretires, the former tight end for the New York Giants, who after one season there retired, didn't play last season. We last saw him in 2023, where he caught 52 passes, 552 yards for the Giants. Then we saw him make an ill-advised music video, and then he peaced out for a while. But now he's back and getting traded to the Miami Dolphins, who obviously just dealt Jonnu Smith. I have a little story about this. So we just had a content creator dynasty draft. It just got spun up. It's got guys like Trevor Sikkema, Connor Rogers, the Stock Exchange crew, guys like that franchise guy on YouTube, Brett Coleman on YouTube, like a bunch of content creators. I think Hail Mary Sports on YouTube started the whole thing. And we're getting down to like late rounds. And I'm looking at who's on the board. There's 29 rounds. So it's like a deep, deep dynasty draft. And I see Darren Waller, and I'm like, Darren Waller is just batshit crazy enough to unretire. Like he's the kind of guy who, given his, I shouldn't put that on. He's just tumultuous enough, shall we say.
He's got a lot going on.
A little harsh. He's got a lot going on, but has had a tumultuous enough career given his past. He was a guy who came in the league as a wide receiver and then had drug issues, went out of the league, came back, and then all of a sudden 1,000-yard receiver with the Raiders. And then only 4 years later, after that 1,000-yard season, guy's out of the NFL. So had a crazy, crazy career arc. Well, he's back and now with the Miami Dolphins. I'm staring at him, looking, and I'm like, should I draft Darren Waller? Like it's like we're picking guys who aren't even on rosters right now. I ended up picking Henry Ruggs at that spot. Didn't pick Darren Waller, but I got him with my fab money on waivers today. Just found out this morning. So got Darren Waller anyways. But this one's crazy. Do we think it, with the Miami Dolphins specifically, do we think this moves the needle? Do we think he's going to be back to the form we saw from him?
Well, I think first and foremost, when you're talking about a guy that's returning to play after taking time off, you want to make sure that they're in the physical shape to be able to play the game of football. I know my trainer down here runs and competes in these High Rocks events, which is like hybrid athletes. It's essentially, think CrossFit, but maybe more of an athletic endeavor. Darren Waller's been doing those, which I think speaks volumes about how he's preparing, because, a guy like Darren Waller, you think about his rap career and you think about probably a lot of distractions. And we knew that coming into his 1,000-yard season in Las Vegas. This is a guy with, a checkered past. And this is coming from somebody who has a quote unquote checkered past. The hardest thing to do when you're a guy like me or Darren Waller is be consistent and showing up every day. And you said, look, 1,000 yards, and then he faded away, and then he retired. He went through some stuff off the field. He had a failed rap career. The other unique thing about guys like Darren Waller and myself is that when you get an opportunity to introduce yourself and you get an opportunity to, I guess, new spectators, new teammates, I think this will be a golden opportunity for a guy like Darren Waller, who's had some time away, who's got some more perspective. And quite frankly, the options are less for this guy off the field because he's already tried rapping. So what do you fall back on? It's football. And, he's got a lot of God-given talent. And I know Mike McDaniel will utilize him the right way if he is physically capable to play football again.
Yeah, obviously Rob Gronkowski, the most notable tight end to unretire in recent years from 2018. He took 2019 off, comes back in 2020. Tampa Bay Buccaneers obviously ends up winning a Super Bowl with them. He even said, though, he's like, the game of football, when you take time away, a lot of other sports, if you're like a golfer and you took a year off, if you're a baseball player and took a year off, a lot of the times it's tough to get back into the swing of things. Football, it's like you're all honestly, I don't say better, but your body feels a lot better after a year not getting hit. You obviously unretire as well. Unfortunately, didn't get to see you on the field that year, but like you could speak to that, just like the punishment you go through and then taking a year off of that and just like how your muscles respond, how your skeleton, how your back responds, all the things that get worn down over the course of getting.
Well, you think about when these guys start playing football as youths, and oftentimes it's a number that starts with teen. And for some guys, it's 8, 7 years old. You haven't, and when you're a youth, you're playing other sports, you're doing a million other things. You're running around, you're roughhousing, and then you become a college player, and it's a full-time job. It's year-round. You're doing mat drills in the wintertime. You're doing spring practice in the spring, summer practice, and then the season rolls around, and you're beating the shit out of your body. You never get a break. I remember the first break I got as an athlete was at 32 years old or 31 years old when I was finished in Chicago, and it wasn't just a 31-year-old that had a good body. I was beat to shit physically, but I took a year off and I had never felt better as an athlete when I came back to Kansas City. Obviously, I got a little bit unlucky. I got rolled up in spring practice, but the only thing that took time for me was the speed of the game. And, I would imagine that it's even faster as an offensive lineman than for a guy like a tight end who's working in space. Stuff like that.
Who's dictating terms?
I don't doubt for 1 minute that Darren Waller is going to come back and have a good year. I'm not saying he's going to have 1,000-yard year, but he's going to be a guy that looks hungry for football. You fall in love with the game when you take time away, when you're away from the guys. I think a guy like him needs community more than most, and he'll get that in an NFL locker room.
And for the Miami Dolphins, it's a no-brainer. I mean, they're in a weird spot. I don't think anyone expects them to be, Super Bowl contender given what their defense looks like this season. But if you're Mike McDaniel and you're a little bit on the hot seat, right? The way you keep your job is that this offense hums. If the offense is putting up points still, even if you're not necessarily winning games and you're, the de facto OC, it's tough to fire a guy like that. So Darren Waller, I think, is going to help them put up points. All right, we're going to take a quick break. After that, our tiers. F tier, D tier, C tier, no U tier on this show. Because I thought there's enough to go off of that. There's some receiving cores. We'll get to them when we talk about them that have a lot of unknowns. I'll talk about them then. But I put everyone in a tier just because everyone at least has guys, with just the nature of the receiving position. All right, coming up after this.
Here we go. The 2025 CBS Sports NFL schedule is here. 18 glorious Sundays.
He's got his receiver touchdown.
Filled with rematches.
Oh, the play of the year.
And rivalries.
Touchdown, Bengals.
Plus, plenty of superstar showdowns. And an epic matchup between the Chiefs and Cowboys on Thanksgiving. Clear your Sundays beginning September 7th for the NFL on CBS and Paramount Plus.
All right, F tier. And I don't think it's a coincidence that this F tier has a lot of like young guys. That's kind of, they could, all these teams outplay this, but I'm putting them here for right now just because on paper, it's tough to really love what I'm seeing for any of these receiving cores. I'm going to read these. You give me your take, and then maybe I'll give some explanation or some context where it's necessary. So I have the New England Patriots first. Obviously, I've lamented last year. It was even worse than this. But the moves they made this offseason, Stephon Diggs, obviously drafting Kyle Williams, who I like. They have more talent this year, but we still have no real known talent. Your best known talent's coming off an ACL and, allegedly doing cocaine on a boat in Miami just this past week, which is not to say that there's not productive wide receivers around the NFL doing such, but there's concerns out of New England with his offseason behavior already so far. You got Pop Douglas, Mac Hollins, Kayshon Boutte there, Jalen Polk, Javon Baker. They really have the kitchen sink here at the receiver position. They have names. They have guys they've added to this roster. It's just, I'm not sure any of them are great. Tennessee Titans with Calvin Ridley, Tyler Lockett, Van Jefferson, Eleke Omenor, Kamari Dike, who they just drafted, Traylon Burks, who was your former first rounder, Xavier Restrepo, who's your UDFA, who played with Cam Ward, and then Chigakonkwo. Panthers with Tedero McMillan, Xavier Legette, Adam Thielen, Jalen Coker, Hunter Renfrow, who's back from not a retirement himself, but not playing this past year. Tommy Tremble, Jatavion Sanders at the tight end position. And then I also threw in the New York Jets with, probably the best receiver of any team on this list with Garrett Wilson. But then after that, the worst of any team, in my opinion, Allen Lazard, Malachi Corley, Arian Smith, Mason Taylor, relying on some rookies and second-year guys to take big steps there. Those are your 4 F-tier teams.
Yeah, I'll start with the Patriots and Stephon Diggs. I mean, my, when he is right, he is dynamic. He is a playmaker. He's somebody that strikes fear into the secondary of football teams. But you don't know which version of him you're going to get. I would think that with a guy like Mike Vrabel, a veteran player like Stephon Diggs would be able to have some sort of mutual respect and understanding that, I've had a lot of these player-type coaches where they say you're going to be yourself, when you're out of the building. We want you to be you. But when it's time to work, it's time to work. I wonder how far on the work side of that pendulum things swing for Stephon Diggs this season. Now, the Patriots are a team that's gotten better as a roster, but they're still, like you said, it's like receiver by committee and no real stars in this room. I do like the addition of a guy like Mac Hollins. And if you go watch Mac Hollins in Buffalo, he made some big plays for that football team. He's a gritty guy, do it all, a real New England Patriot type, but limited. As for the Titans, we've got a lot to see with Cam Ward and how he is able to utilize his targets. But the fact that Calvin Ridley is the first guy on the list for this group, no offense to Calvin Ridley, it speaks to the state of affairs in Tennessee. For the Panthers, obviously we have a lot of chips on the table for Tetaroa McMillan to have a great year. Xavier Legette was quietly pretty darn good for Carolina, and we know Thielen is a salty vet. The guy that I really like in this list is Coker. A lot of ability for the youngster, and I think he's somebody that's going to continue to flash for this Carolina Panthers team. And for the Jets, it's funny, Garrett Wilson, great receiver, Allen Lazard, some drop issues, but a guy that is a big target, somebody that I think Justin Fields can lean on. But to your point, they're going to run the football a lot. So, I mean, I think I wrote on my Jets notes here, look, I wrote on my Jets
one
notes
wide
here.
receiver sets. Can we do one wide receiver?
They're going to run the rock. Get out of here. That's what I wrote for the Jets. So I hope that they run the rock. It's an O-lineman's dream to play in that offense. You're not going to give up a lot of sacks. Let's just hope that Justin Fields and this receiving core can figure something out. And Allen Lazard is not going to drop the ball.
Yeah, I think Jeremy Ruckert, who's your tight end 2 in New York, is going to be a more, I don't want to say featured piece, but a more critical piece than your wide receiver 2 in New York. Just given, I think, how this offense is going to be set up. It is not going to, if I had to guess, I think this is going to be the most run heavy offense in the NFL this season. That's where your talent lies. That just everything is set up for this team to run the football. And when they are taking shots, it's going to be, Arian Smith is going to be more valuable than than Allen Lazard, because he is going to be your take the top off the defense guy, the run, deep shot sort of thing. That's what this offense is going to look like. So I don't foresee that team leaving the F tier anytime soon. If you had to pick one of these 4, though, that by the end of the season we're saying may not be F tier anymore, which one would you say?
It would be the Panthers for me.
That's where I was at with them too.
The steps in the right direction for Bryce Young. Confidence goes a country mile in the National Football League. If you can find a way to gain confidence in a league where you just get the shit kicked out of you every week, you're in a good spot. Bryce Young has the confidence. He's got T-Mac now. Leggett, we talked about. Thielen is the vet. Coker is like, get him the rock as often as you can. They don't have a terrible unit. It's F tier because there's some unknowns there. What is the second year for Xavier Leggett going to look like? Does Coker make the big jump and become a volume guy? And does Bryce Young continue to build on what he started last year foundationally, or is he kind of level out as that guy who's pretty good? You can win with him, not because of him.
I think by the end of this rookie contract for all these guys, so obviously Coker, Leggett, that's 2 years from now. So 2027 season, that'd be T-Mac year 3. I think we could be talking about this as a B to A tier receiving core. I think it could be a very good receiving core in time. Obviously, I'm just hedging right now because they're all so young. And at this point in time, we just don't quite know. All right, D tier. 5 teams. And some pretty darn good teams in this.
Yes.
But I have the Bills kicking it off. Obviously, the Bills, another team that has kind of the kitchen sink approach at their receiving core. Like their 5th best receiver isn't a bad receiver, but their best receiver is not a good receiver either. There's not a great receiver either. They just have a lot of kind of guys in this core. Khalil Shakir, Keon Coleman, Josh Palmer, Elijah Moore, Curtis Samuel, and then Dawson Knox and Dalton Kincaid at tight end. I'll get to Dalton Kincaid a little bit later when we talk about him, but that's their receiving core. Broncos, Cortland Sutton, Marvin Mims, Devon Villay, Troy Franklin, Pat Bryant, who they just drafted in the 3rd round, Evan Ingram. Los Angeles Chargers in this tier as well. Ladd McConkey, and then, Quentin Johnson,
Huge.
Mike Williams, Trey Harris, Keandre Lambert-Smith, Will Dissly, and Tyler Conklin at tight end. Pittsburgh Steelers, you have DK Metcalf there now leading it, but after that, Robert Woods, Calvin Austin, Roman Wilson, and then Pat Freiermuth and Jonnu Smith at tight end. And the Seattle Seahawks with Jackson Smith and Jigba, Cooper Kupp, MVS, and then Noah Fant at the tight end position. Torrey Horton, Jake Bobo at receiver.
Don't forget
as well.
Jake Bobo now.
Sorry, didn't want to hate it. All right, there's your 5 thoughts.
Look, I mean, like you said, there's really good teams on this list, and there's obviously 4 of these teams, 3 of these teams that have pretty darn good quarterbacks with Justin Herbert, Aaron Rodgers, and Josh Allen. I'll start with the Broncos, though. This is just not a team that's built to go out there and air raid you to death. They're not going to throw the football all around the yard. They're looking to beat you on the ground. They're built that way. The offensive line, the way they've drafted, their quarterback takes care of the football, his ability to run. But I think that will make things dangerous for defenses on the outside because, as we've seen over the course of the last few years, Cortland Sutton is a guy that can be relied upon. He's one of those under-the-radar studs at the receiver position. I also love the addition of Evan Ingram. And when he gets an opportunity with some of this run action to go get open downfield when the eyes are in the backfield, Evan Ingram can be explosive. We've seen him have dynamic years at the tight end position. So I'm excited to see how he's involved in that offense. For the Chargers, Ladd McConkey was a stud last year. Is he going to take the next step and become one of these guys that is just week in, week out, putting up ridiculous fantasy numbers? QJ, are we going to get anything out of this guy this year? Because he is open a lot. And, Justin Herbert's a good man because he's thrown him the football. He's thrown him the football a lot and given him many chances. At what point do those chances diminish? Mike Williams, you know the deal with Mike Williams. Can he continue to be himself? Is he going to have any fall off? Dissly, Conklin, that's a good room. Not a great room. That's a good room. Dissly has been a guy that Justin Herbert has relied upon. But again, this is a team that wants to run the football. They've got an offensive line that can protect the edges very well, but they do have the ability to run the football at will. And for the Steelers, DK Metcalf is your number 1, but we've seen at times, sometimes his mental gets in the way of the physical, which is unfortunate because he's so talented physically. Robert Woods and Austin, those 2 guys are veterans. They're probably more often than not going to be in the right place at the right time for Aaron Rodgers. I don't think Aaron requires much more than that outside of having a number 1 in DK Metcalf. Freiermuth, he's become a stalwart and a staple in Pittsburgh. And then for the Seahawks, we've talked about it. They don't have anybody that's really going to be taking the top off the defense. They've got a number of guys who can get open. They can win quick routes. I like JSN. He's a guy that can do a bit of everything. But none of these guys scream, the ceiling is coming off the house if I'm a defense. I'm going to keep this thing in front of us, force Sam Darnold to be tremendous with the football, anticipatory throws, things of that nature. There's a reason this is the D tier category.
Yeah.
I didn't talk about the Bills. Khalil Shakir is unbelievable. Get that guy the ball 20 times a game. Keon Coleman, he's bigger than you think. He's a horse. I think that they need to continue to find creative ways to allow him to catch the ball and then run with it. Guys bounce off Keon Coleman pretty well. And then Knox and Kincaid. I want to hear your thoughts on Kincaid because obviously we've got such lofty high hopes for Dalton Kincaid. He's so talented, but physically and then obviously the way they ended the season last year in Buffalo had to be tough on Dalton.
Yeah, so last year he played through a knee injury the vast majority of the season. And if you watched him as a rookie to year 2, you were disappointed, right? You were like, what is this? He had over 700 yards as a rookie, almost 700 yards as a rookie, 673, and then only 448 last year, and just was like not the same athlete. But the injury hampered him. Like it was obvious. If you watched him coming out of Utah, you thought this guy was going to be, like a tier 1 tight end in the NFL. So if he joins that, if he does live up to that promise that we saw as a rookie, didn't see last year, but saw coming out of Utah, there's a good shot this receiving core is a lot better. It just lacks your outside route winner. They still do not have that. They signed Josh Palmer to kind of be that, but it is a lot of slot receivers. I mean, Khalil Shakir, Keon Coleman, Elijah Moore, Curtis Samuel, all of those guys are slot receivers. And now you can set up the offense creatively to, not necessarily the true X receiver is, I don't want to say completely gone in the NFL. It's not dead, but it is not a necessity the way, if this were 2002 and we're creating
X receiver, you're talking like Nico Collins.
Yes, where every team in the NFL is looking for that type of wide receiver. So not obviously, Josh Allen wins the MVP and that offense is great last year, but it still is a receiving core that's set up to where you have a third and long, you can be in trouble. And that's why they traded for Amari Cooper. Obviously, Amari Cooper was pretty much cooked, and that's why he's still on the open market.
And that's why it's a damn good thing they've got a good offensive line, the best fourth down threat in the NFL with Josh Allen.
That's
because
why
you're 4 down territory a lot.
And that's why he won the MVP. The other interesting one, you brought up Quinn Johnson, the fact that, and I love that you brought up the fact that Justin Herbert keeps throwing to him. And it does blow my mind a little because most quarterbacks, I obviously as a Packers fan, but just the past 15 years watching Aaron Rodgers, know that when a receiver is making dumb, boneheaded drops, the plays that Quinn Johnson has been unfortunately known for the course of his career, Aaron Rodgers would just have stopped throwing him the football. Yeah. He basically couldn't have played him because Rodgers would just not have looked his way. Justin Herbert, almost to a fault, will be peppering this guy with targets. He'll drop a pass, next play, throw him another one. Well, he drops another pass. It is actually credit to Justin Herbert that he keeps trying to give him some confidence. But Quinn Johnson, the nice thing is you saw some improvements from him from year 1 to year 2. Obviously, still such a long way to go in terms of reliability. If there's anyone from this tier that you see going and exceeding expectations, who would you think it is?
Well, it's not going to be the Seahawks. I think that
they were borderline F tier for me. I will say.
I think that the Steelers could be interesting, but it's not my answer. Quentin Johnson, if he catches the ball, the Chargers could go, but that's a big if. I would say the Bills. If Dalton Kincaid can return to form, because they've got the true volume threat in Khalil Shakir, Keon Coleman's the physical mismatch, and you've got a tight end, and obviously you've got the running back as well with James Cook. They've got all flavors of offense there. And if they can get Dalton Kincaid to be the guy that you talked about as he was scouted, my goodness.
I will throw the Chargers up there. I think Ladd McConkey's amazing. He's a number 1 type of wide receiver.
He really is.
Featured guy. He was top 5 in yards per run last year as a rookie. I think Quinn Johnson was always a project. If you would just see another step from him, he's just so physically gifted in what he can do. But then I also think Trey Harris is a guy who is NFL ready as a second rounder. And then Keandre Lambert-Smith is immediately your field stretcher. I think they have talent in there to get to the C tier, even if it's not necessarily, I don't see them going B, A tier anytime soon, but I think they can be a quality receiving core at the end of the day. Let's get to that C tier, where I got 6 teams here. And as a Packers fan, it kills me, but they are in this tier. Green Bay Packers with Jaden Reed, Matthew Golden, Romeo Doubs, Dontavian Wicks, Christian Watson, Savion Williams. Now, obviously, Romeo Doubs and Christian Watson going to play. Who knows with all their injury history, but they have a loaded receiving core. I just don't know if they have any true dudes in that receiving core. And then a loaded tight end room, too, with Tucker Kraft and Luke Musgrave. After them, I have the Browns, Jerry Jeudy, Cedric Tillman, Deontay Johnson, and then their tight end position of David Njoku and Harold Fannin Jr. Raiders, Jacoby Myers, Trey Tucker, Jack Bash, Deontay Thornton, Brock Bowers, obviously the headliner there. The Commanders are in this tier with Terry McLaurin, Deebo Samuel, Noah Brown, Luke McCaffrey, Jalen Lane, Zach Ertz, and Ben Sinnott at tight end. Saints with Chris Olave, Rashid Shaheed, Brandon Cooks, Cedric Wilson, and then a deep tight end position with Juwan Johnson, Foster Moreau, and Taysom Hill. And lastly, your New York Giants with Malik Neighbors, Darius Slayton, Wan'Dale Robinson, Jalen Hyatt, and then Theo Johnson, Daniel Bellinger at tight end. Thoughts?
I'll start with the Saints. The big question mark is obviously the health of Chris Olave. When he's healthy, my goodness, and he's dealt with some scary stuff. Rashid Shaheed, Brandon Cooks, you've got some real burners in that room. And then you've got the positional versatility at the tight end position with Juwan Johnson, Foster Moreau, Taysom Hill. So many different ways you can use these threats in the New Orleans Saints offense. I'm really excited to see how the new head man in town is able to implement his stuff with all these gadget type players. Well, Taysom Hill is really the gadget type player. For the Giants, Malik Neighbors is an all-star. Darius Slayton's a guy that's probably overlooked. Wan'Dale Robinson, and then Jalen Hyatt. I remember watching Jalen Hyatt in college being like, God, this guy's going to be making plays in the NFL. They just need to find a way to protect whoever it is playing quarterback. And
they got speed.
And get Malik Neighbors the football. And if Malik Neighbors is double covered, you've got a couple other pretty good options there. And for Giants fans, I know they're excited to see how that quarterback situation turns out. Commanders, look, what version of Deebo shows up? Because if Deebo shows up in great shape, this offense is going to hum. And we know Jaden Daniels is going to show up ready. Terry McLaurin, a lot of questions about his contract at Washington, but I think he stays put. This is just one of those situations you don't jump ship from. The Raiders, look, they're going to live in 12 personnel. Okay, they just went out and said they're not trading Michael Mayer. He's not going anywhere. So it's Mayer, Bowers, and Ashton Genty at the running back position. Jacoby Myers is a guy that's probably overlooked league-wide. I'm not sure what your thoughts are on that, but with the volume that Brock Bowers got, a guy like Jacoby Myers is in the shadows a bit. I think this offense could be a lot of fun. Geno Smith is obviously somebody that can distribute the football well. For the Browns, my biggest question is, when it gets cold, is Deontay Johnson going to play? Because he opted not to go into the game when it was cold because he couldn't feel his fingers. We've all been there, man. I understand, but it doesn't get any warmer in Cleveland. David Njoku, superhero, looks like a Marvel character, kind of plays like it too. So whoever plays quarterback for that group, I mean, Jerry Jeudy showed last year that he had his renaissance, all right? And if Deontay Johnson can have a renaissance this year, that was the leading receiver in the AFC North a few years back. So don't forget.
I am I think all these receiving cores are intriguing to me for one reason or another. Like I go into this season watching all of these and being like, man, there's a thing about each that I just like, they could be so much better than this, like so much better than the average tier. But I think you almost have to put them here because there's just a lot of unknowns. The Raiders to me are so intriguing because you have this pairing of Geno Smith, who is one of the most accurate quarterbacks in the league, like consistently top 3 in the NFL in completion percentage over expectation. That, NGS stat that basically says like, into tight window throws, things of that nature, as good as it gets in the league. And what he has now with the Raiders is, in my opinion, and what the stats say, is the receiving core with the best ball skills in the entire NFL. Jacoby Myers last year did not drop a single pass on 87 catches. Not a single one. Jack
Unreal.
Bash, your second rounder, he dropped one pass a year ago on 62 receptions. Brock Bowers last year, only 4 drops on 116 catchable, 3.4% drop rate. And then obviously Michael Mayer as well, who has incredible hands. So like you have a receiving core built to make these tight window receptions with the best tight window thrower in the NFL. So like that is an interesting pairing to me. You have the Browns who have Deontay Johnson as your number 2, who was, when he was with the Pittsburgh Steelers, a number 1 type of wide receiver. You have Harold Fannin, who led college football, not just tight ends. He led all of college football in receiving yards last year to be your tight end too, which would be like a receiving tight end position in that offense. I mean, the Commanders with Debo, who again, in his prime, was one of the best receiving, like best gadget weapons, best just playmakers in the entire NFL, but has kind of ate his way out of that the past few years with how he looks. But if he wants to show up motivated this year with a possibility of a new contract looming, you could have one of the best number 2 receivers in the league. Green Bay Packers, obviously, we've talked about them ad nauseum, and just like all these young guys, just when does the light switch flip on for them? And then the New York Giants and the New Orleans Saints, probably 2 of the 5 fastest receiving cores in the NFL. I mean, you have your 1 and 2 for both those teams with Chris Olave, Rashid Shaheed, Malik Neighbors, Darius Slayton. Their 1 and 2 are both 4-3 guys. And then you have 4-3 guys lower down the roster as well. So like there is speed to play with for both those offenses. It may not matter with the respective quarterback positions that I think we put in the F tier back a few pods ago. But
yep.
I do think all these are very intriguing receiving cores for one reason or another. Let's get to the B tier, where they aren't just intriguing. These are darn good receiving cores. It's just how high can the ceilings of all of them push? Let's start with the Arizona Cardinals, who I'm making maybe a little bit of a call here, putting them, given what we saw last year from them. Definitely was not a B tier receiving core last year. But this is me saying Marvin Harrison Jr. from year 1 to year 2, I'm expecting jump into stardom, right? I'm expecting you have a true number
continuity.
Yes. So you have what I hope becomes a top 10 receiver in the NFL, paired with what definitely is a top 3 tight end in the NFL right now in Trey McBride. And then some good pieces alongside that in a Michael Wilson Jr., in a Greg Dortch, that can be your complementary 2s and 3s in that offense. So that's why I'm putting them in the B tier. I have the Houston Texans, who obviously Nico, the headliner, another top 10 sort of wide receiver in the NFL, alongside a lot of guys who are very talented. We'll see how it ends up going. But Jaden Higgins, Christian Kirk, Jalen Noel, John Mechie, hopefully Tank Dell is back from his injury. Don't know about that one, but we'll see. Dalton Schultz as well at the tight end position. I have the Chiefs in this tier with Rashee Rice, Hollywood Brown, Xavier Worthy, Juju Smith-Schuster, Jalen Royals. We never got to see it fully healthy last year. Hopefully we do this year. And then obviously Travis Kelce at tight end. Atlanta Falcons in this tier with Darnell Mooney, Drake London, Kyle Pitts. Those are the real headliners there. Tampa Bay Bucks, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Meke Buka, Trey Palmer, Jalen McMillan, and then Cade Otton at tight end. Indianapolis Colts with Michael Pittman Jr., Josh Downs, Alec Pierce, Adonai Mitchell, and then Tyler Warren at tight end, your first rounder. And then the Jaguars. I felt a little bad putting them here because they could even be like an S tier receiving core with what they have.
We don't know yet.
Hedging at this point in time with Brian Thomas Jr., De'Ami Brown, Travis Hunter, Parker Washington, and then Brenton Strange at tight end.
Look, these are fun groups right here, okay? The B tier is fun groups. And I saw Marvin Harrison Jr. at the presser as well. I think he does have a B tier type jump for this unit. Trey McBride.
He's coming for Trey McBride's job, I think.
Trey McBride, unbelievable. And obviously Kyler Murray, as talented as anybody in the National Football League. I just realized Kyler Murray was a first-round pick in the Major League Baseball draft.
Yeah, first guy ever, first round.
Okay, so I knew he was like, because I'm a baseball guy. I got drafted baseball and football. I thought maybe 10th round, like a Russell Wilson type, 6th round, 7th round. He was a first-round pick, bro. That's unbelievable. Okay.
I mean, he's got the movement skills of what you would want, right, on a baseball field.
He's Ricky Henderson on the base path, and like he hits bombs as well. So, yeah, that's my Cardinals bit. For the Texans, Go back and watch the first 7 weeks of the season, okay, last year. And just imagine a better offensive line with what they were doing with Nico Collins, because that's a man right there. That's that true X receiver you're looking for. Obviously, Tank Dell's health is going to be a huge swing for this football team because he was so important to him 2 years ago in that rookie campaign. Mechie is another guy that's got explosiveness. But if Tank Dell and Nico Collins are on the football field, and Dalton Schultz, who's a top 10 guy, in my opinion, if they're all on the football field at the same time, and that guy, C.J. Stroud's the quarterback, look out. It's dangerous. And for the Chiefs, Rashee Rice was playing like a true number one before he got hurt. Hollywood Brown obviously has some traits that people love to see at the receiver position. Xavier Worthy, if he can just slow down a little bit, okay? So many of those explosive plays, he was just stepping out of bounds last year. Get him to figure out some spatial awareness, and you're looking at maybe an A-tier receiving group. I think Kelsey looks great. I think he's going to have another Travis Kelce season. He may not, break the records that he's set before, but I think he's a guy that not many people are going to bitch about this year. I'll say that about Travis. And for the Falcons,
is he showing up in shape this year? What's he going to
look
like?
He is in shape. He looks great. He's clean cut.
Okay.
He's in shape. He's living the life. He's a rock star, but he's doing it the right way. The Falcons. I like the Falcons because they got a little bit of that basketball team going on with different body types. You get the point guard, shooting guard, you got the small forward, you got the power forward, you got the center. Well, they got all of it with Drake London. He's that big body type. Darnell Mooney, shifty, get in and out of his breaks, find the soft spot in the defense 20 yards down the field. And their quarterback's going to be able to get him the football this year. We're not going to have any wasted reps at the quarterback position like we saw with Kirk Cousins. Bijan Robinson, obviously a huge part of this offense, run and pass. And Kyle Pitts is the biggest question mark. If Kyle Pitts is as advertised finally, and I'm not going to put my money down on that, this might jump into an A-tier type receiver room. The Colts, Michael Pittman, true number one, downs, explosive. Get him the football. Watch him make people miss. Get him the football a lot. Adonai Mitchell. This group's got a lot of talent. And then obviously the guy that I wanted to be a Chicago Bear, Tyler Warren. Line him up anywhere, do anything with him. And for the Jaguars, like you said, there's a lot of unknown as it pertains to how Travis Hunter is going to be, what this offense looks like under Liam Cohen, and how much they get out of Trevor Lawrence. But BTJ, phenomenal way to start a career.
Yeah, I hedged the Jaguars, putting them in the B tier, even if I think there's a good shot they end up in the A tier, maybe even higher. But just because Travis Hunter, compared to, your guys getting the hype he got at the receiver position in recent years, Jamar Chases of the world, the guys who have really come in and hit the ground running, he was not a polished product just by nature of the fact that he played both ways. So if he is featured at wide receiver, and even if you are playing him a little bit both ways in Jacksonville, it's going to take away a little bit from your receiving core. And his rawness as a wide receiver and as a route runner means I just don't know if we see, 1,000-yard year one, the way we saw from his teammate Brian Thomas Jr. or some of these other guys that we've put in that tier of talent in recent years. So that's why I put him in this B tier, but still obviously a great receiving core. Best by far that Trevor Lawrence has had in his entire career. The one team that I wanted so badly to put in the A tier, and I truly do think by the end of the season we'll be talking about him as an A tier. Unfortunately, we may not actually get to see that on a football field in terms of the production because I put their quarterback position at the F tier. The Colts.
Yep.
This is one of my favorite receiving cores in the NFL. I think Adonai Mitchell is on the precipice of being like a number one type of wide receiver. You watch him run routes, and his ability to get open against the best corners in the NFL is what it looks like for the elite guys. He just is a little bit of a head case in terms of his consistency, in terms of his reliability at this point in time. But the guy is so freaking talented. Josh Downs as well as a slot receiver.
Yep.
Talk about guys getting open at that position. He's as good as he gets in the NFL. I think, honestly, Michael Pittman Jr., you said is number one. He's probably your third best option there, ideally, at the end of the day, maybe even fourth with Tyler Warren there now in the fold.
Yep.
So I think that the potential for this receiving core is off the charts, like truly S-tier potential. But if Daniel Jones and Anthony Richardson aren't any better than we've seen them in the past, it might be all be for naught. And this might just be like a super run heavy offense at the end of the day, unfortunately, even though they've built this crazy receiving core. All right, let's get to the A tier. But first, a quick break.
When you need your sports news all the time,
we've got breaking news to bring to you.
CBS Sports HQ gives you a snapshot of all the sports that matter to you. When you need your sports in a snap, find it on CBS Sports HQ, streaming free anywhere you are.
All right, A tier. You're going to love this because I put the Chicago Bears in the A tier. And maybe you won't love it because maybe you think they're supposed to be S tier. They were close to a U tier team, though, because realistically, you have so much young guys in terms of Colston Loveland, Luther Burden, and Rome Odunze going to year 2 that I wouldn't call Odunze an unknown. I'd actually call him their best wide receiver at this point in time.
Yep.
And that's a lot saying how much they paid, DJ Moore. It's probably the one in this tier that by the end of the season, I might call them an S tier, but just right now, they're firmly in this tier for me. Baltimore Ravens in this tier with Zay Flowers, Rashad Bateman, and then that tight end duo of Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely. I put the Rams here. I know some people want the Rams to be in the S tier. I just don't know if I trust a 32-year-old Devontae Adams to be, Devontae Adams we all know and love. Puka Nacua, Tutu Atwell, Tyler Higbee, Terrence Ferguson at the tight end position. Dolphins I put in this tier as well. It was at one point, 2 years ago, probably the best receiving core in the NFL, in my opinion. But Tyreek's taken a step back. Jalen Waddle's been banged up. And you just have never added any size to this receiving core in terms of you have two tiny number 1 and number 2. That just limits your ability to do certain things on an NFL football field when that's really all you got. Obviously, they added Darren Waller. Could be a big plus, but we'll see at the end of the day how much he really ends up impacting this roster. Detroit Lions, I put here with Jameson Williams, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Tim Patrick, Isaac Tesla, and then Sam Laporta at tight end. That one, you could convince me. Some of these teams you could convince me are S tier, but I put them here. The 49ers are another one that you could probably convince me. But Brandon Ayuk coming off an ACL, I'm hedging with that. Not sure where you're going to get from him. If you got the guy you saw before he signed that big contract, yeah, it's an S tier roster. But if not, Ricky Pearsall, Juwan Jennings, Jacob Cohen, as well as George Kittle at tight end. It's a very, very good receiving core. Just not quite in that elite tier at this point in time.
Yeah, B tier to me felt like Batman's with a couple Robin types. This is the A tier and the S tiers. It's about the unit. I mean, obviously you've got fantastic football players, but you've got the chess pieces where you want them. You've got who you want. And I'll start with the Chicago Bears. DJ Moore, guy who can do literally anything at the receiver position, but more often than not, you see him catching the football, fighting for yards. Rome Odunze was open dozens of times last year and was not able to receive the football, not because of his own doing, but because there was a comedy of errors.
Ball was going his way.
Comedy of errors happening in the backfield. Luther Burden, the third, is a guy that, the Bears got away with stealing this guy, to be honest. A lot of people had him as a first-round receiver. I think they got him with the 39th pick, so end of the second round.
And with him, I'll just say, he doesn't even need – so the criticism I had, most people had, not a polished route runner. He doesn't need to be anything more than just spot routes, ball in his hand, break a tackle. That's all he needs to be effective in whatever role he's going to play in this Bears team because they have so much talent. It's just he doesn't have to come there and be their number 1.
So the Bears are either going to be in 11 or 12 personnel more often than not. And the conversation as training camp rolls along will be, do we want Loveland and Kmet on the field all the time together? Or do we want these three receivers on the field together? And whether it's Luther Burden or Colston Loveland, or if it's Cole Kmet, if it's obvious that Loveland's better than Kmet early, it'll be Cole Kmet. That's the conversation will revolve around. Are we going to have 2 tight ends, or are we going to have 1 tight end on the field? But I love this group. I think Rome Odunze has himself a Pro Bowl year this year. And for the Ravens, obviously everything is made exponentially more dangerous because of the running back quarterback combination, but the offensive line is strong. And then you take a look at a guy like Zay Flowers, who, in my opinion, is disrespected league-wide. I think he's one of the top receivers in football, and I know you feel the same way. Rashad Bateman is a guy that can get it done for you. And then the most dangerous piece outside of the backfield are the 2 tight ends with Isaiah Likely and Mark Andrews. We know what Mark Andrews can do. We've seen it for a decade now. Isaiah Likely, people are starting to figure out this guy is a real dynamic threat at the receiver position. For the Rams, Puka Nacua, he's one of the highest rated receivers in football year in, year out. Is he able to continue that streak of dominance? The physicality that is required of you to play in that Rams offense at that position is a lot, which is why I have my doubts about a guy like Devontae Adams having sustained success with the Rams. I know that they're going to throw him the ball all the time. You got Tutu Atwell, and then obviously you've got Tyler Higbee there at the tight end position. And with Matt Stafford, he is the tide that raises all ships. Everybody will get a bite of the apple this year, but obviously Devontae and Puka are going to be getting the lion's share. For the Dolphins, another one of those, conversations revolving around the group. And the group got better with Darren Waller. And I like the way you put it. Their receivers are not physical mismatches in terms of size. So there's only a few flavors from which they can draw from to get these guys open, to get them clean looks at the football. And then Tua's got to be on time, and he's got to, be in rhythm, and he's got to be healthy. For the Lions, I mean, look, this is a unit that doesn't have, it feels like there's no all pros in their room, but it's just a bunch of guys who probably are pissed off that they didn't get all pro, and they're like, we're just all going to make Pro Bowl, and we're going to win a ton of football games. That's what I like about Dan Campbell's group, and it just feels like that's the mentality in that room. Sam Laporta came on the scene hot. Obviously, people were expecting an even further uptick in his production. Didn't get that, but still damn good for Sam Laporta. Jameson Williams, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Tim Patrick, all these guys can be relied on. Amon-Ra St. Brown is the engine that makes that offense go. I know that the running game's huge, but got to have it situations. That's where they go. Not a lot of teams in the league have a guy where they can be like, no, we're going to ASB. Good luck guarding him. And then for the 49ers, I mean, Brandon Ayuk. So the question mark is so big over Brandon Ayuk after coming back from his injury. What a tremendous route runner, a guy who can get open at will, seemingly. Will he still have that body control, explosiveness after the injury? Ricky Pearsall came on in a big way for the 49ers, and a great story there. And then George Kittle coming back. You love to see the elder statesman still in the room, in the building, and obviously going to be a big part of that offense, run and pass.
Yeah, this one, I think the Ravens might be the most controversial inclusion into this tier, just because the numbers that they put up aren't gaudy the same way, the rest of this tier. But you watch Zay Flowers and Rashad Bateman and their ability to get open, and they get some benefit in that offense because they do longer developing routes, knowing that Lamar Jackson, just by nature of who he is going to give you more time. But on those guys get open at will. They are two of the best separators in the NFL. They're obviously, kind of in the tier or similar sort of issues that the Dolphins have, in that they're not physical. They are skinny wide receivers. They're not contested catch sort of wide receivers. But you got two tight ends here, contested catch guys. They work the middle of the football field. Mark Andrews, Isaiah Likely. So two top tight ends, two of the best separators. They are firmly an A-tier receiving core to me. The one that I was like, gosh, I think it might still be an S-tier receiving core, even though they lost Deebo Samuel. I do think the 49ers, because I think 1, 2, 3, Ricky Pearsall.
Juwan Jennings, I didn't mention him. He's great, too.
That's the one guy who I'm like, Juwan Jennings is a chain mover. If Juwan Jennings was in a lot of offenses around the league, a lot of other offenses around the league, I think a lot more people would know his name, because he'd be getting 150 targets, because that's just the type of wide receiver he is. He's a guy that, on slants, on whips, on these pure underneath intermediate
quick timing
routes. He's awesome. He's awesome at the catch point. Super physical. So yeah, the 49ers still borderline that tier, but with the S tier, with the 4 teams I put there, what I was looking for is elite. I want game changers if I'm in the S tier. I don't need 4 guys who are good. I want 2 guys who dominate.
Who are great.
Give me 2 guys who dominate, because if you're scheming up a defense and you want to throw attention to a 1 guy who dominates, if you have a second guy who dominates as an offensive coordinator, that's all you need. That's really all you need. Now, it helps obviously to have depth then too, that you can rely on. But as long as you have 2 guys that can win one-on-one pretty much every time they're given those matchups, your receiving core is sick. And so the S tier is the Philadelphia Eagles, with obviously A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, John Dotson, and Dallas Goedert at tight end position. Dallas Cowboys, maybe a little bit controversial here. But I've had no bones about saying George Pickens is top 15 wide receiver, CeeDee Lamb top 5 receiver. You got that in your room, you're going to be damn tough to stop. And then you have a very good tight end position. Obviously, after that, the receivers are bad. And that's why I was worried without George Pickens what this receiving core would look like. But I love their tight end position. Jake Ferguson, Luke Schoonmaker. I think Ferguson, a top 10 tight end in the NFL, and Schoonmaker, a reliable backup for him. Then the Minnesota Vikings. Justin Jefferson, dominant, right? A true number one, have to account for him every play sort of guy. And then even if their number 2 is probably the worst number 2 on this list, in Jordan Addison, they have TJ Hawkinson as well. So their number 3 is also very good. And then Jalen Naylor added Rondale Moore, who I'm excited to see how he fits in that offense this year as well. And last, but certainly not least, Cincinnati Bengals. Jamar Chase, T. Higgins. I don't even need to mention any of the guys. Jamar Chase, T. Higgins. You have a dominant receiving core if you got those 2 guys.
The more I look at this S tier, the more I feel like there should be 5 teams in the S tier, and the Chicago Bears should be one of them. Okay. Hey, look, I mean,
they could get there. I'm not debating it. And if we're
in
just
all seriousness,
give me a fast forward button and put this to next offseason, there's no doubt in my mind they will be next.
You're absolutely right. But the thing that I love about this S tier is that you truly do have the Batmans and the Robins on this list. It isn't just people dressing up as Batman and Robin. I mean, I look at Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, and I just get nightmares as a DC. Jettis and Addison. I mean, Addison has been a proven big-time help in this offense. And you mentioned Hawkinson. Lamb Pickens, that's the big question mark. I mean, you said it. But both those guys are top wide receivers. And how do you defend that? The Eagles, it goes without saying, you couple the offensive line with the running back position and then this receiver room, and bringing in Dotson last year. We didn't even really get a ton out of Dotson, but that's probably the top room. It's probably the Eagles and the Bengals, in my opinion. But yeah, the Bears are right there with Moore, Odunze, Burden, and then you add the tight end Loveland. If he's a star, this is an S tier unit. But I like your list, Mike.
Hey, if I had the button from Click and we just, fast forwarded, even maybe end of the season, I could put in there, because I've made no bones about it, that I think this is the Chicago Bears team is the most diverse receiving core in the NFL. It has the best complementary skill sets of any team. And I think the addition of Olamide Zaccheaus is a little under the radar too, because DJ Moore, Rome Odunze, Luther Burden, all, I don't want to say they're all not the same type of wide receiver, but they aren't burners. I think your fastest 40 of that bunch is Luther Burden at 4.41. So you don't have your true take the top off the defense guy. Now you do in Olamide Zaccheaus. And so with the Bears, you have just a ton of complementary skill sets to one another that, when you have, the Grandmaster dialing it up, when you got your, why am I blanking on who's the guy who's the best chess player in the world? Well, you got Ben Johnson at the helm.
I think it's the Grandmaster champion or something.
Yeah. Well, I'm trying to think of the guy who currently is, whatever his name
Magnus.
is. Yes. Magnus Carlsen. There you go. Which sounds like a world's strongest man name every time I think of it.
Yeah, he's got the strongest chess piece.
But it's going to even outperform, I think, or should outperform even the talent in that room. So, yeah, you could, like I said, you convinced me a lot of those A tiers being S tier this season. But I think what I leaned on for this S tier was just known elite receivers. There is not a number 2. So you probably have 4 of the 5 best receivers in the NFL in this S tier.
Yep.
With AJ Brown, CeeDee Lamb, Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase.
Batman.
4 of the 5 best. And then of the
Where's
number 2,
Higgins? Where's T. Higgins on the list of top receivers in the NFL?
So I think he's probably between 15 and 20. Okay. And that's what I was saying. Of the number 2s, your worst guy, Jordan Addison, he's probably closer to your, 35 to 50 range. I think that's a fair, but that's still obviously as number 2. It's still a high-end number 2.
A lot of receivers out there.
But then they have a top, 5 to 10 tight end and TJ Hawkinson. So you have, T. Higgins probably 15 to 20 in the NFL. George Pickens probably 10 to 15. Devontae Smith probably, I'd put him 15 to 20 in the NFL. That's how you get to I mean, we saw it with the Eagles, Vikings, and Bengals offenses last year. 3 of the best offenses in the NFL. It helps to have an answer on every single play. Every single play. So there you have it. There's your tiers. We're going to be going through everywhere in the NFL. So we've done offensive side of the ball at this point in time. I believe next week we're going to flip over to the defensive side of the ball. Hope you guys have been enjoying these. Leave us some feedback on who you think we got wrong, who we got right. And until next time, enjoy the 4th of July. Happy birthday, America. Keep pushing.